I'll start off. John and I, over the last few metaforums, I've sort of managed to have a chat with John, and I've kept thinking, why is his words coming out of my mouth? Hang on a minute. And there was with Peter, there was a real synergy between when we were talking about how groups work and the VSM works with it. So, and I was listening, I kept getting worried that a lot of the application of the VSM is top down. It's what I call stop the world, let's sort it out and reprogram it. And my experience is that and I'll go in. So on the website, the shared website for this lecture, there's a paper called Bottom Up Makes Top Down. And I explain very clearly why I don't think top down works very well. And there's a very simple reason. You'll see on there a diagram of Agile, Lean, Deming's loop, the OODA loop, Kaizen, and they all look exactly the same. They're all a loop, and it's all pretty much the same. And it's the hypothetical deductive method, which is the scientific method. It goes back to create a hypothesis, do an experiment, examine the results, act, create, and you go through that loop. Please come in. There's a spare seat here. So, and so I want to, if I can, just show one diagram, which is really important. Right, can I pull up
Sorry,
my web page? Do you want to share? So can you just pull up my desktop? Anyway, okay, it doesn't matter.
Boring is not on.
Yeah, I'll use the board. I'll do it right.
Okay.
I come from the military where they espouse the OODA loop all the time, which is observe, orientate, decide, act. And the whole purpose, if you actually go to Boyd's thing, it's about getting inside somebody else's OODA loop. So your timing of that is faster than their timing. And the military love that. But it's a scientific method, again. Now, there's a very good website somewhere I found where if you take orientate out of that loop and put it in the middle and connect it to what you have is observe, orientate, decide, orientate, act, orientate. So you've got a constant order. If you take orientate out, or so if you take act out, go or observe, orientate, decide, observe, orientate, decide. You've got a simulation loop. If you take decide out, you end up with a closed loop. And if you take both observe and orientate out and go act, decide, you've got an open loop. Now, if you then suddenly look at the VSM with those three, you see if you put observe as system 5, orientate as system 4, decide as system 3, act as system 1, and then look at the connections. You see everything is connected to everything very much. So you suddenly realize that the VSM is a system that's working in real time with all of the functions. And you sit and think, why are we using the scientific method for something in real time, like people management or whatever? And because that is ingrained in us, we actually think that is the right, we're being brought up in the culture that is the way to go. Not everybody, if you go to Eastern cultures, they look at it a bit differently. Now, what happened is when I went on one of these forums webinars, Mark Lambert was doing this, and I said to him, Mark, it's a stop the world, let's sort it out method of applying the VSM. How do you do that seamlessly as you're going, interactively all the time? And he said, don't ask awkward questions, Jonathan. And I said, well, and it dragged back to a program I went 20 years ago. And the story about that is I was taken over as operational manager for the Royal Fleet Auxiliary. And I had about 20 ships to look after and about 50 people in my office. And the first day I took over, I had 200 emails on my inbox in the morning, a whole queue of people outside, and the phone was constantly ringing. And I got told that my secretary had been taken away from me because we didn't need secretary. And I thought, I thought this is, it took me all day just to answer the emails. I thought this is beyond stupid. And luckily that weekend was a bank holiday. So everybody went home, managed to, if you're in the civil service, you manage to try and wangle a whole week's leave out of one day off. So they all disappeared from me. So I went into the office and I wrote this program that I'm going to show you. And I put it on everybody's machine and I banned internal emails. And the way it worked absolutely astounded me because I stopped being swamped by work and I started actually controlling what was happening. And when you see it initially, you'll see it looks pretty much like a sort of project management thing, but it's a simple project management. But it instantly takes over all the workload. It produces reports, it produces job appraisals, it produces job descriptions, it produces a newsletter, all from simply basic. What I did in Basic was simply providing a need for everybody to use the system as a to-do list. So they would always, everybody has a to-do list. So what I would do is say, right, it's on the system. And the system then, you had to allocate how much work and stuff like this. The system worked out resources all the time, and also money based on the amount of each cost. So I could instantly give people reports, budgets, things like that, all of that. So the concept behind it was information went in once and it was used seamlessly all the time. I took it to the university and said, look, I'm really clever. And they said, maybe, but
Which university?
Portsmouth Business School. And the person I was talking to, I was friends with, was Jim Rowe. And he said, what you've done is create a viable systems model. And I said, well, perhaps I'm not as clever as I thought I was, because I don't know what the viable systems model is. But I modified the system. So originally it was based on Drucker's management by objectives. So I modified it to include layers. And that even astounded me more. And one particular thing happened one morning is you'll see it has a map of the environment. So when people do work, they map a point in the environment where they're working. And one day this guy came to me and I found I was spending an awful lot of time looking at my systems and organizing, saying which the system also works priority. So which was my most important systems and what was I trying to do and so on. And this guy came to me and said, I've got something on my to-do list. It doesn't fit in your student system. And I said, having spent ages on it, I nearly killed him. And then before I just did the final blow, it came to me that, hang on a minute, he's found a piece of work. When we examined where it was in the environment, so this is a new piece of work. This is a new area we're going into. And the penny dropped that if I hadn't had this system, I would have never seen that. He would have just done the piece of work. And this would have carried on under the radar for a long, long time. So, so that got me. Now, one of the things that John and I were very simpatico on was conglomerates and corporations. When I did my research, I was astounded. If you want to be happy, go and work in a small charity. That's where people seem to be most rewarded and feel better. People in business were really unhappy, is the way to put it. It was a job, and I'm here. And it came home to me one day because I was trying to do my research. And when you do research, you're trying to find someone to answer your question. So I went to the Chichester railway station, and all the offices were shut. So I went to the guy on the ticket counter, not the ticket counter, the barrier. And unfortunately, just as the train came in, and I explained to him I was doing this research and I wanted to talk to one of his managers. And he said to his mate, who was right across the console, so everyone else, "Here, Bert, this idiot wants to talk to our management about efficiency." And I said, forget it, you just answered all my questions. People were really unhappy in business. And I think that's getting worse. And what John had done a lot of work on was cooperatives. So, sorry, basically, just give me, I'm only going to talk for a brief while, and then we're going to make it interactive, I promise. If you want to interrupt, please just interrupt. If you agree with that sort of statement. If you don't agree, please say so. So I feel, and I think John feels the same, that as people get pushed out of the workplace more and more, taxi drivers are the next ones to go. They're going to be replaced by machines to drive everywhere and all this sort of thing. There is a reason why cookery and gardening are such big hobbies, because it's the only place in the world you can be creative. You're not allowed to be creative at work anymore. It's what do you think you're doing? Just do your job. But imagine you have a group of artists who want to create a gallery where they a space where they can exhibit their work, and they've got to coordinate that. And they want maybe coordinate where they buy their gear from, stuff like that. What I had felt was that this software I used could be very easily used for them to set up, or modified to use for them to set up a cooperative to work. Or it doesn't have to be a formal cooperative, just work together. And my ultimate aim was to sort of produce it as an app. So you go on Bluetooth and just connect with all people who suddenly have a similar interest to you. They would pop up on your screen and you would start working together and creating a synergy. Now,
Jonathan, just to interrupt, your presentation is ready if you want to run it.
Okay, but I've managed to just talk at the moment.
Well, doing fine.
Rather than show people pictures, but can they hear us? Can Peter hear us?
Yeah, I can hear you. Yeah.
So Peter was the one who sort of started this all off, because when I said to Mark Lambert, I've got this process of actually doing things, Peter picked up on that and then said to me, where is it? I want to see it. So I showed it to him and John, and they thought there's some value in it. But when I showed it to you, I want you to remember it's 20 years old. I use it actually at home to run my life as a sort of to-do list diary. The only problem I've got, there's only one resource in it, me, because my wife refuses to be a resource. So when I look at the workload, it's all me, you see. But so just briefly then, I was going to talk about how I came to this point, history of change management. I'm very proud of the point that for 20 years I was involved in change management and achieved absolutely nothing. And it was the biggest learning lesson of my life, in that I tried everything. I didn't bother to go and do an MBA because I tried everything on the MBA. And I used the sales expression that most of it was what I call management bollocks. It just didn't work. There was all so I remember once I got heavily into grief. Don't know why I got heavily into grief, but there's a chart of grief called Kubler-Ross's Systems of Grief. And it's been adopted by a chap called Fisher for business. So when you announce people redundancy, they go through these cycles of grief. Well, it's absolute bollocks. Okay, people who have done work, like a chap called Bonono, find that grief doesn't go through cycles. Grief is dependent on your resilience, and resilience is dependent on your network, your personality. It's a complex thing. Okay, it's not nice, neat little cycles. But there was no research ever that showed that applied in business. It was just taken. And if you go to a business school, I bet you hear somewhere there will be Fisher's cycles of grief for things stuffed on. So management seems to just take these theories and carry on with them. And my experience over 20 years was very few of them work. And the other problem was, in the military defence, we had endless cuts. And they weren't called cuts, they were called efficiency savings. And what happened was, every time we had cuts, they would say, there are no sacred cows, anything can go. What they meant was, don't touch the surface flotilla, because that's our identity. Now, in any organisation, it's worth looking for what the rituals are. So in the military, we're still showing people we don't have a sword in our hand. Okay. And we're still marching people around 17th century battlefields. Okay. Why? These have become what I call a pantomime. Okay. They are there because they're actions that create identity, strong identity. If you go to shake hands with someone and they salute you, you know instantly who they are. I'm military, and this is who I am. But actually, if you look at other rituals, and most organisations have developed them, they're a means of expressing identity in some way. But Ivo talked about pathological autopoiesis. where a system starts just becoming so. And if you look at a lot of the military and stuff like that, you know, I used to have a joke. What's the purpose of the UK military? Hence the realms, and it's there to further the career of military officers. Because if you look at the amount of interest, and actually, I've got into quite a row with Sing Fleet over that. Who and I said, yeah, now hang on a minute. Look at your pay scales in relation to maybe the civil service pay scales or pay scales elsewhere, and you'll see civil service pay scales are very flat. Military, the higher rank you go, it goes exponentially. And I said, he said, well, that's because they're good leaders. No, we have, and the Navy and military pride themselves on their leadership. And so I want to introduce a concept called social identity theory, which is, so I started working with Professor Huxley at Exeter University, because he looked at how groups behave. And that started to interest me, because I started to realize I was dealing with tribes in my organization. And when you tried, when you started bringing change and one tribe felt threatened, you might as well have been on the plains of Africa and a lion just roared in the bush near you. People were terrified that they would move very quickly. And what you ended up with power struggles, everybody would aim, every group would try to get somebody on the management board so they could block any change that was going to come through that were threatening. And when I went back through the management board minutes once, I found the management board hadn't actually made a decision in 5 years. And not only that, minutes of the management board were held secret. And nobody actually knew what the management board did. But we did a lot. We used to sit for hours and hours and hours. So one of the lessons I learned was when you try to change an organisation, it's connected by rubber bands. And most of the time you try to change one bit. And as you try to change one bit, it gets pulled back. So they lean part of our organisation, the flag officer training, where you go on ships and examine them and sort of test their capability. And the lead said, he's writing long reports. What are these long reports about? And the guy said, well, we have to tell what they're doing wrong. And he said, yeah, but they can't take all that in. You just need 3 points. So the lean said 3 points, off they went. I think they were Kinsey, so we paid $40 And but 2 months later, they were back to long reports. And the Kinsey's team came back and they come back to reports. They're very cynical. You don't think they're writing long reports, tell the people what's wrong. They're writing the report to show their boss how clever they are at what they're doing. And what you try to do is to take that away. So one of the things I started to realise was, and you've heard me sort of go on and interrupt everyone about the algebra node. What's the algebra node is the driving force behind the change. So where is the algebra node in the BSM? Where's the driving change? Now, if you read Brain and the Firm, right at the beginning, he talks about an algebra node, the driving force, how pleasure or pain moves the system states to where it wants to be. And it's a fundamental part of the homostat, and the homostat is in every link in the BSM. Where's the algebra node for driving change? And we don't talk about it, but it's really important. And I found that in change, that was incentive. How are you aligning what the organisation wants and what the people want in one thing? And I found something very interesting, that money is not an incentive. It's people's self-worth that's an incentive. So again, it hit me in my research when I went into Stone Pillar, which is an organisation in Chichester that looks after homeless. And there was a lady I was talking to, just trying to get anything in my questionnaire. And she said, I could get double the money at Sainsbury's, but I'm really worthwhile. And I come into work really feeling. And I got that from every small charity. Didn't get it from the big charities because they're being run as a business. Small charities, people were really happy. I thought, if I ever get another job, it's going to be in a small charity. But I think, talking to John, I don't know if John had come in at all, John, talk about experience of cooperatives. Did you get that same sort of feeling in a cooperative?
Yeah,
Feeling yourself
absolutely. There was one comment I wanted to make about creativity. And when I went through the research, for those who don't know my history, is that I got a PhD in cybernetics, hated academia, and moved to Yorkshire to work with a bunch of hippies setting up whole food shops and planting potatoes, which was lovely. It was a really enjoyable way. And we started setting cooperatives that got more and more successful. There was a chain of whole food shops in the north of England that the first year there were 5 of us. Second year there were about 12 or 13. And the third year there were 120 cooperatives all around the north of England. The thing was just booming. And they were all people like me with MSCs and PhDs who fled the business world and academia because it was competitive and dishonest and just a pretty awful place to work, we found. And then we started moving into problems with organisation because a small group, like charity shops that Jonathan's talking about, work really, really beautifully. If everybody's in communication with everybody else, there's general good feeling, people have a common purpose, that's clear. There's a whole range of things. And I spent quite a lot of time going through quite a complex DSM diagnosis. And you can go through you can identify all the 5 systems, you can look at all the interactions, you can look at pattern of relationships, you can look at real-time information, all the stuff that we struggle with in big organisations, all just happens naturally with half a dozen people working together. And I think personally, it was probably the most exhilarating working environment I've ever had. Because if you're working with people that you trust and you know, and you all get on well together, you can become very, very, first of all, very, very efficient. And secondly, it's an exhilarating way to work. So the small group is no problem at all and maps onto the VSM. You get to a big group, and the warehouse I was working in at the time was about 50 people. And they were still trying to run it like a small group. So what happened was Wednesday afternoon, the entire place shut down. And everybody got around this huge table with this agenda, which was already like 50 items. And you had the entire meta system of the organisation with everybody involved. And it was a disaster. It was frustrating. It was horrible. So we tried to, we said, okay, we got to change. I mean, there was a question that came up in one of the talks. When do you change? How do you introduce change? And generally, it's very difficult to change if things are going okay. And you need to be on the edge of a crisis. But when people are saying, yeah, we've really got to try this, because what's going on at the status quo is just unacceptable. So I started doing some research and came across Taylorism I'd known about, but I found a paper by a guy called Mike Robinson who worked with Gordon Pask. And he had this quote from Taylor in about 1912, something like that, on a paper called On the Art of Cutting Metals, which isn't the sort of paper you'd immediately found. And there's this quote that he says, if any of the workers in my system show any creativity or initiative, they will wreck the system.
And there's a very recent paper published by 2 eminent professors saying creativity, there's some industries where you don't want creativity.
Yeah.
And it's partly right, but if you look at the predominance of Taylor methods, they're coming back in a big way.
Well, and I think the shadow of Taylor is still here.
Yeah,
I mean, it's a lot. I mean, in the last century, Taylor was the guy. I mean, everybody said he's the man. You want to be efficient, meet Taylor, do the stuff. Apart from that strange guy from Wales with a long white beard who had some different ideas. So the contrast to that is the viable system model, where you get down to the lowest recursion, and that's you and me. Okay, the lowest recursion of viable systems are human beings. And as we all know, for viability, all 5 systems have to be up and running and working efficiently and doing their job. So every individual has to have a system 4, which requires individual creativity, responding to the outside world, coming up with new ideas. So in Taylorism, it's going to destroy the system. And in the VSM, it's not only acceptable, it's actually required for viability. So you've got a complete shift in a lot of the the fundamentals of how this stuff works.
So can I jump in, John, just for a minute? Because let me be a little bit of an Algernon for this group. I put this session into the agenda because I know of John's work and Jonathan's work, and as you may know, I have a very strong interest in technology and how it affects our behavior. And I've been looking for many, many years for some software to support the VSM operationally. And the Metaforum has just incorporated itself in Companies House as a cooperative. And I wanted to put a flag up in this conference to invite participants to be aware of the software and the approach that Jonathan took 20 years ago, admittedly, but to look at that software and to examine it and see if it has an application today in any of the organizations you're working with in terms of the VSM, and whether or not it's something that we as a cooperative could work with Jonathan and others to examine in the context of AI. And I did put the title together. I actually asked AI to help write the title, so it's a little creative. But my hope is that we would talk about AI a little bit in relationship to Jonathan's program or programs that we might create that would help run a cooperative like Metaforum, for example, because I do believe in applying to oneself that which you're talking about. And so I do try and apply the VSM ideas to myself, which is always a challenge in many respects. But, how does the VSM apply to Metaforum, and how does technology support operational realities for Metaforum? We're all carrying around phones. It's why I encouraged Metaforum to use Scared or Shared for this conference to help give it some coherence and organization. So that's my challenge really to John, Jonathan, and everybody in the room, and Metaforum in general, is what software can we develop that would help Metaforum and other organizations use software and technology, phones, and AI, of course, to better run an organization along the terms of the VSM. So that was my hope for this session, and maybe conversations after. So, I'm happy to help coordinate any action. So that's really my piece for this morning is yes, let's bring AI in. Could it even help convert the program that Jonathan has with some vibe coding program? And I know we've got a lot of things to think about, but that was my thought anyway. So I'll hand it back to the room. Thanks.
Okay, I've just got 2 lines, and so I need to explain the theory underlying the program before you go any further. So what we end up talking about is shared values and beliefs now, or generating shared values and beliefs. Now, what I found with top-down design is it's very hard to, you can try and recruit people that have shared values and beliefs, but that doesn't help. What top-down design often tries to do is to sell an abstract idea. So, and I'll give a good example. What we're trying to do is create, from an abstract idea, to create all the detail. You're trying to take a model, if you want, a really low variety model, and apply it to a high variety system. And you can only do that from a highly abstract thought. The trouble is, the best example I ever saw was David Cameron. Am I allowed to insult politicians?
Yes, please.
Yeah. So he went on television, and the BBC guy said, "So we understand you've got a new initiative." He said, "Yes, it's called Big Society." I said, "Great. Can you tell us any more about it?" "Yes, it's big." "Anything more?" "Yes, it's about society." And big society. And that was all he had. I mean, the idea he had was actually what we're going to do is replace all the public services with communal spirit. Okay, we're going to create this. We're a wonderful society altogether, so we wouldn't have to pay for the National Health Service. I don't quite know how he thought that would work, but it died very quickly. But that is often what I found. In the Navy, you would have a department called ACNS, the Assistant Chief of Naval Staff, who sat in the mod. And they obviously picked the best blue sky dreamers they could think of to go into that department. And every year they came out with a new paper, which was, so one year we had to adopt agile. We had to be, not your agile, agility. It was about being able to change quickly. So I watched this with interest because it never actually got anywhere below papers. It never actually achieved any, because next year it wasn't agility anymore, it was called swing. It was slightly different, okay. But that never got anywhere either. And we went through these blue sky dreaming papers that kept coming up. And it was interesting to watch the engineers in the organisation who were process driven. So the executive side were blue sky dreamers, and the engineers were process driven. And the engineers would look at every paper and think, oh, where's the process of it? So you had two, and so you had two very different sets of beliefs driven by their personalities and the type of people they were. And what I found was people don't give up their beliefs. I was just talking about it earlier. There's a thing, your beliefs are your experience in the world. It's how you trust that you can actually navigate the world. It might have come from your culture, it might come from your own experience, but beliefs at the end, the highest system 5 in your system. And you don't give them up easily, except sometimes you do. It's interesting to see that. I look to try and understand which set of beliefs are the utmost, highest level of beliefs you have, and they're your moral framework. Jonathan Hyatt's work is really worth interesting in. He talks about, there's two people you should read it if you want to take it further. Jonathan Hyatt's work called The Righteous Mind, and Joshua Green's work called Moral Tribes. And Jonathan Hyatt, have you read that?
Only the first half to go to. The second is utilitarian entirely. It's fine.
Joshua Green's a utilitarian, but he calls it deep pragmatism because utilitarianism has some problems. Where was I? Oh yeah. So the key point is, which I explained to people earlier, I think some people missed it. You have 4 dopamine pathways, which gives you a kick of dopamine, make you feel good. One of them goes to a place called the nucleus accumbens, which is your belief system. And when you confirm a belief, you get a shot of dopamine. You feel good. So that's why you start reading the same paper every day, because it's telling you what you want to hear about the world. And the newspapers know that. I think these idiots want to hear about this, so we'll keep telling them stories about it. And they keep buying that paper. Okay? And you feel good. But if you're a Telegraph reader and you suddenly go and pick up the Guardian, you think, oh God, bloody hell. Or if you're a Guardian reader and read up the Telegraph, you think, what are these people, where are these people coming from? If you're a systems thinker, you read all of them. But the point being, you hang on to those beliefs because they make you feel good. When you work in an organisation with shared values and beliefs, you feel good because you're getting a kick of dopamine. So yeah, go ahead.
I just wanted, I think everybody misquotes Kant.
Yes.
I think that right. It's actually I doubt.
Oh, is it?
I think.
Oh right, I didn't know that. Yeah, that's funny. Okay. Yeah, please go ahead.
There is a lot of evidence from cognitive developmental psychology that people do evolve their belief system.
Oh, very much so.
And the theme that comes back every time again and again is how one develops a meta perspective on his beliefs. And it's a bit aligned with what Wolfgang yesterday shared. The meta perspective development is the clue for evolving in a belief system, and there is even a pattern you can predict how it will evolve.
Not often in their moral framework. Jonathan Hyatt named, and this is why, because what worried me was sometimes people had this belief. I believe Republican Party. We believe this. We believe. Oh no, we don't. We believe this. Totally opposite. Well, hang on a minute. What's going on there? But sorry, I'll just finish quickly. Jonathan Hyatt's work identified 7. He just categorized 7 moral frameworks. The first one was care versus harm. The second one was fair versus unfair. The next one was loyalty versus disloyalty. The next one was authority versus whatever it is. And he goes on, and the last one's sacredness. Okay. Now, what he noticed was that Liberals tend to have a very strong bias towards care, harm. They're very orientated towards care. That's what fundamental. And the way he tested people in these ones, he would say to somebody, so somebody from India had a strong family orientation, respect for elders. Is that right? You know, family, you must respect your elders. He would say to them things like, you're in a play and you have to slap your father as part of the play when you do it. And people would confabulate. They would not know why they were saying no, they wouldn't do it, but they would invent reasons why they weren't doing it. You would do things like, right, we're going to learn how to give injections. So we've got these injections here of water, and we've got a little baby here. So what we want you to do is to practice on the baby. And Liberals, some other people would say, yeah, I need to practice.
That's a description of the current situation. What is absent in the approach is a developmental perspective.
Okay.
Let's say, what are the dynamics through which ones evolve?
Yes.
So there is a difference between, let's say, categorization approaches,
Yes.
which you refer to, and which are valuable, and developmental approaches,
Okay.
which focus on the dynamics of development and how cognition changes during one's lifehood.
Yeah.
And I
That's
think
interesting.
if we want to bring VSM to another level, we need to start understanding how development works.
Yes.
And
I'd agree with that.
try to take a distance from all the categorization frameworks.
Yes, I would agree with that, very much so, yes. And the problem I think you have as a systems thinker with this is you suddenly got to try and be cognitive expert.
Yeah.
With
No,
systems
it's-
thinking, no, I'm just saying the area that you have to start to understand about people and so on. I can't believe the number of subjects I have to start going and reading about. But you're right, and that's why I think it needs to be a community thing where we bring expertise together. Because
You can already start with one author, Theo Dawson, who is a specialist in studying how moral and ethics develop over one's lifehood and what it takes to develop it.
What's the surname?
I think that's really important.
Theo,
Theo
T.H. Dawson.
Dawson.
Theo Dawson, I've got that in.
And there is a German philosopher, Susan, but her family name slips my mind, but she has published a book, Moral Ambitions.
Oh,
And
okay.
that's also a very, very good introduction. And you have Otto Lasker as a third author, who has gone very deep in that.
Thank you for
And
that.
you know, developmental lines, the developmental themes do not evolve in a kind of coherence. You have the cognitive development, you have the maturity development, you have the spiritual development, you have the ethical development,
Yes.
and you have the behavioral development. And they all evolve according to different lines, so they are not in parallel. When
Oh,
development happens, there are frictions in between them. And once we understand those frictions, once we understand what, for example, systems do in those developmental lines, that's the sense making I was talking about in the first day, then we will become better systems practitioners.
yes, no,
But as long as we kind of dissociate systems with sense making, we will arrive nowhere.
I agree 100% with that, and I wanted to come to this because top-down design doesn't really change people's beliefs. You can't. The only way I found of changing people's beliefs is to grow people's beliefs together through common shared experience. So you do stuff together now, and you socialize that. And if you do it and the problem comes, how do you do that in a really big group where you don't form little fractions of group who are experiencing things? But if you do that in a group together, you start to grow your shared systems of beliefs. And I watched a policeman, when I was in Sierra Leone during the Troubles, they sent out an English policeman from Manchester from here to Manchester to run the police force. The Inspector General, Ian Biddle, was name. And his management plan was shared values and beliefs, 3 lines. The civil service went mad. Where's the paper you're going to deal with? No, it's shared values and beliefs. And he created an exceptionally good police force. They even arrested me at one stage.
That's how good it was.
My driver Donald knocked somebody over, and even though I had an armed brigade of Gurkhas behind me, the little policeman walked up and got under arrest. So no, take Donald. But it was very good, and this policeman who was, and the amount of corruption in West Africa at the time then was enormous. You know, he was doing his job as a policeman within the values of the police force. It was brilliant. I phoned up Ian and said, "Look, I've been arrested. This is fantastic." But I wanted to just show you this, and it comes from Jasmine Gavaradani. Did anyone ever work with Jasmine? Anyone? He was a student of Akhoff. And it's a paper that's sort of gone under the radar. And it's simplistic, but it works for me, and I hope it'll work for you. Is that if you go right back to Aristotle and ends and means and ends, one of the problems is every end is a means to another end. And so I kept asking myself first of all, where does this stop? And it stops with beliefs. But actually, it's a little bit more than that. It's if you believe that this end is caused by these means, there is a belief tying those together. This end. Now, if you have two groups, what Jasmine looked at was if you have a group with a tendency this direction and another group with a tendency this direction, and they happen in almost every society between liberals with a little L and conservatives with little people. Conservatives will be people who want things to stay the same. Liberals basically want to see change. Okay? So what you get is the Akhoff's four solve, dissolve, resolve, absolve things. So if you solve it, one side wins. It's a zero-sum game, which never works. It never happens. If you resolve it, you compromise somewhere on that line, which is what our politics does. You go there. If you absolve it, you just ignore it. And if you dissolve it, you take the problem away. You frame the problem in a different way. If you take those two, though, and put them at 90 degrees to look at what we want to do is create a new vector, a new direction. Okay? If you have the two opposite sides believe in the means but not the ends, they will cooperate. This is what you see in politics a lot. Yeah, we don't agree with you at all, but we agree that what you're doing will get us to our ends and it'll get to you, and so we'll cooperate. If you believe in the ends but not the means, okay, you will be in competition. Okay? And it's only if you believe in the ends and the means and the beliefs underlying them that you collaborate. So that's what we're trying to do. And the way you do it by growing this is Stafford said strategy starts in systems 3. I've never been able to find where he said that, but I'm sure he said it somewhere, didn't he? Strategy starts in system 3 with action. Okay. Now I'll show you a system I developed with one of the, and it's built into the system of aligning the actions you're taking in 3 and 1 with the strategy. Because one of the things I found in military defence is the way we would do strategy is a team would go off into a darkened room and then you wouldn't go in there because if you opened the door, all the yellow stickies came down. And that's weeks of work with. But they would come up with a plan. And eventually they would unleash this plan on you. This is the new strategy, this is where we're going. And you think, right, actually what we're doing is 180 degrees from that. So, and I always used to love the joke where you ask the farmer, how do I get to the village? And he says, well, you don't start from here. And what I thought was, hang on a minute. And I don't hear Stafford ever talking about this. He talks about the 3-4 homostat. But what I always used to try to do was to make sure that what Systems 3 was doing was taking you in the direction of what System 4 wanted.
Yeah.
Just to build on something that you said there,
Yeah.
and maybe offer some insight. Bud Lawson, I don't know if you came across Bud, but he was the author of the ISO standards for systems and software engineering.
Oh, right.
And what he did at one of the ISSS conferences is he explained how the OODA loop and the plan, do, check out loop were integrated. So you have a tactical loop, which is plan, do, check out, bottom, and then you have a strategic loop, which is OODA at the top.
Oh, right.
And the A of Uda is the act of planning, and that's where they come together.
Ah,
You know,
right.
so that might be the explanation for why strategy begins at level 3.
But
Isn't this is a continuous process?
It is,
Loop is
it
going,
is,
so it
yes.
doesn't really matter
It
where you
is,
start.
it is
as long as the
continuous,
loop
but
is-
one has more of a focus on the tactical, but one has a focus more on
Yeah,
strategic.
yeah, I mean, clearly you've got these two quite different
Yeah.
perspectives that have to work
Yeah.
together. So where it starts is a bit of an irrelevance.
Yes.
So this paper is available on the website if you want to do it, and it's just, Ivo said it wasn't very well written, but I did my best in the time I had. This is, I often quote De Sitter's design rules, but actually I've just finished Martin's book, which I really liked, although it's very, very business oriented, and I tend to be more social. But Martin actually stressed at one point that the 4 key issues of a system, which are redundancy of potential command, decision making at the level of the information, self-control, self-reliance, I think, or something like that before. And De Sitter puts it into one very simple statement, and I've put it into one simple diagram. De Sitter says, what we tend to do is create complex organizations with simple jobs. Okay, we create, and so what we're looking at here, can you guys, Peter, can you see that?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, what we're looking at here is Chichester's process for fixing potholes. Okay,
Oh, yeah.
close to all our hearts if you live in England. Okay, now there's a main council committee, there's a finance department, there's a planning department, there's an environmental agency, there's a contracts department, there's a civil engineering department, there's health and safety, there's a road inspector, there's a contractor, and there's a workforce. And the idea is it's a complex organisation with a simple job with the people paid the minimum and just given their references to go and do this. Okay. What De Sitter says and what those rules for VSM put your job down is what you should do is create a simple organisation with complex jobs. And bottom up tends to create that. So you've only got to look at poor old Angela, who has worked every day and night doing everything from the finance to the civil. So what you end up if you start off with bottom up is complex jobs. So this is my solution to fixing the potholes, is you have a man with a wheelbarrow, okay, and he's got the money in his back pocket to actually go and buy the materials. He's been working there for years because he's incentivized with a good pension or something like that. And he has knowledge of the area. He knows what's going, and the key thing he needs to know is when to tell people above that this is beyond my, I need the road machine there to come in or something like that. But I've watched Chichester High Street. Chichester is the jewel of that area. It's a Georgian city, it's absolutely beautiful. The High Street has been going to pieces that you trip over bricks and this sort of thing. But if you go into Chichester County Council, there's beautiful architect drawings about what it's going to look like. And I keep saying to them, they're fed up with me. Where's the little man with the wheelbarrow that fixes all the ones, you know, you wouldn't have this big plan if you just kept it in a decent state. And it brings me to mind of the defluffer for London Underground. I explained it so it's very simple, but it was a highly skilled man who every time the train stopped running at night would come out and he had a feather duster or something, and he'd go along and he would clean the cobwebs off the rails, because that actually caused a short. I presume they weren't live when he was cleaning off. And so the management came along and said, we need to cut people. What's a defluff? I'll get rid of it. Feather duster, rails. Look how much we're paying. So they made him redundant, he went home. 6 months later, all the trains stopped running. And so they got in an expert, the expert said, what you need is a person called a defluffer. I said, oh, shit. Okay, get him back. So he comes back and he works away. 6 months later, management changes and get rid of him, don't need a defluffer. So the same thing happened again, the defluffer went home. And they said, 6 months later, the train stopped running. Got in an expert. What you need is a person called a defluffer. Oh, okay, we know one. Phone him up. And he says, oh, no, I'm now a consultant. And I'll just tell another funny story before I go. because Ivo put it up and it reminded me. Do you remember Ivo's little grid of what a stupid and a clever leader? Well, has everybody heard of von Clausewitz's orders to the general staff? No, von Clausewitz. Von Clausewitz, in 1860, said that every staff officer has two attributes. He's either clever or stupid. He's either hardworking or lazy. If he's clever and hardworking, you'll make an excellent staff officer. Leave him alone and get on with it. If he's clever and lazy, you'll make an excellent general. Promote him immediately. If he's lazy and he's stupid and lazy, you'll quickly be found out. But, von Clausewitz said, you must make every effort you can to find the people that are stupid and hardworking before they do irreparable damage. And I can attest to that, is that you would find people desperate to do stuff and doing stuff, but they don't have shared values and belief. They're doing just getting off. Right, okay. So the program you're going to see starts with action. And what it's trying to do is to coordinate all that action. And it's basically just a to-do list for people. But in making a task, you have to think about the higher level and the lower levels of recursion that are involved. So you're forcing people into the VSM, and you also have to think about the environment you're working in. Something I often don't see with the VSM. They keep talking about internally the VSM, but the VSM is in an environment which is of itself. The bottom up process is basically, if you want an academic reference, it's grounded in inductive theory.
Jonathan, we're not seeing the program if you've got it up there. I'm still looking at a man with a wheelbarrow, and I'm wondering about who the man with the wheelbarrow is in Metaphorum.
He's coming your way, Martin. Yeah, we're just going to start the program now.
Okay. And Martin's on here, by the way.
Yeah, no, I wanted to talk to him about his book, which I really enjoyed, but I don't. He's gone blank.
Okay, well.
Right, the last thing I wanted to talk about was self-awareness. I do. What am I talking? I'm sorry, I don't know your name. Is it
Gary?
Gary is doing this on the board, and I thought, bloody hell,
I'm the stupid hard worker.
that's like something I do a lot of. But what I have done was spent a lot of time looking at other systems theories, saying where are they in the VSM, trying to bring everything into the VSM. But what I wanted was one unified theory, because simpler. So I would say, where's autopoiesis in the VSM? Where's Ulrich's critical system heuristics? Where's soft system methodology? Where's Spencer Brown? What happens if we apply Spencer Brown to the thing? So I've spent a lot of time doing that, because it helps me, because my theory was that viability is central to all of them, ish, something. One of the biggest things that hit me was very simple, and it was built into my program, is that if you apply Spencer Brown as and his view of observers, if I look at something, I'm a first order observer. If I observe something, I'm a first order observer. But I have a blind spot. I cannot see my eye seeing. I don't know how I'm making that decision. To see my eye seeing, I need to become a second order observer. I need to see myself and ask myself, how am I seeing? And the only way I could do that is to look in the mirror. So I look in the mirror and I see myself seeing. So I'm now a second order observer. I'm now what's called self-reflective. But according to Luhrmann, have I said that right? Luhrmann? Luhrmann, I always get it wrong. Luhrmann and Spencer Brown, to become self-aware, you have to re-enter the system with the model you had. Let me explain that simply. If I have a car with an engine and a body and wheels, and I go out on the racetrack, having developed it, and I realise as a Porsche goes past me at great speed that a steam-driven car made of cast iron is probably not the best. But all I know at that point, as Porsche goes whizzing past me on the racetrack, is that as a first order observer, that I'm not doing, I'm making a distinction between what was there and what's not. So I go and think about it, and I become self-reflective. I ask myself as a second order observer, why was I beaten by the tortoise? So I'm making a distinction between the two, and I'm asking, how was I beaten by the tortoise? And I form a understanding of self-reflect on what were the factors involved. But that doesn't do anything for me. What I have to do is take that understanding onto the factory floor or the shop floor and start comparing that distinction with what I'm seeing on the floor. So I think, hang on, cast iron, that's not good. So I'm going to make it really light. I need a bigger engine, so I'll go for a big engine in it. So I go out on the racetrack and the wheels fall off. And I realise, hang on a minute, we go through that loop again, and I realise I need to make it strong light and so on. Now, when I go back onto the floor with that, I'm becoming, oh, that is self-awareness. Now, if you ask yourself, where is that in the VSM? Now, Stafford tries to put it in system 4, but it's not in system 4, it's system 3 star, which is making an entry into the system. System 3 star isn't an audit system, it's a self-awareness system. And you need to build that into, you need basically people to take their understanding, which you gain through socialization, into their own work. Okay, does that make sense? And that basically, I need a break, so I just want to do some talking. Does that make sense? That's now we'll go on to the programme. We've got another
25 minutes.
25 minutes. Does that make sense to everybody? Does anyone want to say anything? Give me a break.
I'd be interested to look at the 3-star re-entry, consciousness, awareness, all that sort of thing. Because there's a lot of confusion that I find in the literature about the VSM, where people are saying that all accountability is on 3-star. But of course, if you're diagnosing a system, there's on the resource finding, there's a diagram with accountability not only in capitals and red letters, but with a big board around it. And people seem to be forgetting that a lot of the routine information comes up the central around the source file. And 3-star it is occasional. So I was wondering why you saw 3-star as the entry rather than the accountability axis, where all the information flows up from.
So from accountability, I thought this is really interesting, and I think it's worth a debate. Accountability doesn't go through 3-star.
No, that's right.
And neither does the algae. So you would think the algedonic signal would go through 3-star. You find something in the audit and you go kaboom, but no, it comes from system 3s in the lower levels of recursion. It comes up the accountability channel, actually, doesn't it? Because he branches off.
Well, there are 2 sorts of alerting signals, which again is one of those things that seems to be getting lost. That the alerting signals for the resource bargain come up the accountability channel.
Yes.
Yeah, but then the algedonics come directly from the operational part of the lower.
Yes.
The lower level recursions straight up to 5.
So where is the algedonic signal in a social system?
Whoever shouts loudest.
Almost.
I'm just going to throw a really weird idea that's popped into my head.
Yes.
We've been alluding to and referring to AI in all of this. It sort of was kind of the elephant in the room.
Yes.
How do you think VSM might in some way throw some light on what the hell's going on with LLMs? And whether, for example, you could recognise the various systemic structures within VSM, within AI systems, as they stand or as they will be.
So what I was planning to do with AI was to use it to. I don't have a lot of confidence in AI. Okay? It's like talking to a really clever professor with dementia.
You mean an LLM?
Being a transformer. Okay.
Yes.
So an LLM is a transformer, but you can. So I use Python a lot and a thing called TensorFlow, and you can write your own transformers in TensorFlow. So you could tailor make one for this. You just got problems finding the training material, but you could actually use the system to train itself as it's going along. But I said it's like a really clever professor with dementia. And so what I was going to use it for, was to prompt people to say, look, there's correspondence here. Do you think there's a correspondence? And I'll show you my belief generation system, task generation system, that tries to align strategy and systems 3, which I think system 3 style would be brilliant. Sorry, go.
Jonathan,
You just while you're talking, go ahead.
yes, it still is ringing in my ears.
No.
This system 3 star.
Yes.
I'm not fully convinced of explanation. You say that the self reference of self-awareness is not in system 4.
No. Self-reflectively. Self-reflect. Now it's very interesting. Has anyone got? We nobody ever brings part of enterprise a brave of a firm to one of these meetings. But if you look, Stanford uses
I've got
the
a
word
piece there.
self-awareness in
Jonathan,
the but he also in the diagram put self-reflection on system 4. And in Spencer Brown's terms, system 4 is self-reflection, not self-awareness.
I have a PDF if you want it,
Okay.
Yes, please.
So yeah,
of all his books.
we'll drag it up, but Stafford
What?
uses these words interchangeably.
Yeah, but he clarifies that is inside system 4, besides the model of itself, self-reflection, I see myself,
Yes.
also includes separates the model of the whole
Yes.
organization.
But
The whole organization.
So-
The organization, including the environment.
Ivo
This is
and I
the
are having
environment of that-
kittens because we're activists and we don't believe in mental models.
No, but let's forget that. No, I'm not talking about metal model. No. I'm talking about a representation, identification, or understanding,
Let's use the word understanding.
Understanding.
That's a common subject.
understanding of
Yes.
what am I, my organization, including my environment,
Jose.
inside.
Yeah.
Yeah,
But that's an understanding. It might not be right.
Oh, no, well, you may be
No,
right.
you have- So what we're saying is to be aware, you've got to take that into the system and say, this is my, hang on, that's not working. And that's what system 3 star does. It's auditing this.
That's right.
No,
That's right.
No, disagree.
Yeah,
I
but
disagree completely.
okay, but how?
But we have a,
No, but let's continue to end that there. And why you say that system 3 star? Yes, that's why.
because it's the only place the system re-enters.
Mm.
The system,
That's
the only
right.
place the meta system re-enters. And Stafford didn't put in 3 star to start with. It came in afterwards, didn't it?
Yeah, he's got the connection between in Heart of Enterprise, which is later, as you know.
Yeah.
He's got all the lines between 3 down to the operation inside the lower level recursion systems 1,
Yeah.
but no box.
Yes.
And they're waiting up to the
Yeah.
diagnosis.
You are talking a kind of system 3 star of system 5. Which
Yeah.
was never made explicit.
No, well, the problem is, if he had put 3 star coming from system 4,
No, this is not, this is just
No,
like
no,
a system.
yeah, but if he had put it coming from system 4, I'd be very happy. Because what I don't understand, so for me, the model doesn't work perfectly, and I think rather than take Stafford as gospel, I think it was a work in progress. And you can see him changing his thoughts. And yet I think some people we read
It's a religion.
and it becomes that's it. But actually when you look through, I think he was still developing those ideas. No, is it? We're not allowed to say that.
It's not, it takes stuff
No,
for flow.
But yes, I agree. Yeah, the problem.
We come to a
But probably what you are telling is that we need another system. Not forcing the machine to say, which one we have here that could do this re-entry, the system 3 star, okay, let's take it. No, the system 3 star has a function.
Yeah,
Don't force it to
To
take
do
it
something
out.
else, yeah.
So this function that you say is needed, but maybe it's not system 3 star, it's either system 6 or
So
system.
I think the dichotomy comes in that Stafford instinctively understood this. Because he talked. So one of the arguments between all of the Stafford was that there's no intrinsic motivation. There's no people's motivation in this. He's using Sharon Weaver's information theory. and not say Luhmann's meaning concepts. He's using all these sort of things in there, but somehow he's talking about people. He instinctively, I mean, the first paper I ever read by Stafford was A World in Torment. Yeah, I thought, hang on a minute, that wasn't my understanding of the VSM, but he's translated it into real problems with real people. How's he done that? And I think he instinctively knew something. So he just knew the meta system needs to talk directly to the system. And it's very hard, very hard to start, which line do you draw? And how do you draw that? And you see he goes into diagnosing the system. I think he really struggles to say, I'm trying to draw this in 3 dimensions. So what I'm doing is drawing at angles. So it was, it's a work of art, really, isn't it? And you can't blame him for developing it and growing it. Can I just quickly do the system, because we've only got 20 minutes? Oh, sorry, go ahead, yes.
About relating to 3-star, I mean, I would agree with briefly. Consider 3-star instead of a re-enter second order perspective on the operational organization. And it's not only, in my view, only a second order perspective on the operational organization, but also, of course, system 3. And if you ask the auditors, the problem of auditors is always that what they find is it always relates back to how the organization is managed. But to solve, and I agree with you.
You mean, when you say manage, you mean at a higher level than?
Yeah, it's if you
System 5.
Yeah, 3, 4, 5. Yeah, and what I like really is that he's singled out 3-star as a separate system function and not just a channel, because it has a critical role not only toward the operation but also towards system 3. And if you ask auditors, it's exactly that problem. They have a Deming report which also implicates senior management, and they have to present it. So they have the double. But I would say the solution, coming back to, so in a way it's an ingredient. For me, it's an ingredient information for the self-awareness. But I think the processing happens somewhere else. Like when he says system 4 is the point where the self-referencing process begins. Yeah, it starts there, but
I think
actually it must happen at the highest policy level.
Would we all agree
Yeah.
that this is an area that needs to be?
Yeah, secondly, just coming back to AI, I just wanted to share an anecdote. You found it on my LinkedIn account. But what you said, stupid. Preparing my presentation, I searched for what's the origin of algedonic, the term.
Yes.
In Ashby. So I asked ChatGPT, find me where as far as that has used. Yeah, Introduction to Cybernetics, chapter 16, page 232. Only problem, I looked it up. It only has 40 chapters. And then I asked ChatGPT what it thinks about it. Yes, against common belief, Ross Ashby never wrote about algedonics in Introduction to Cybernetics. And it's just half an hour apart, both prompts. And you think, what is this tool? What is AI thinking self-reflecting?
Does this go along with clever professor?
Yeah,
with
administration.
I think we will never find self-awareness in systems. Self-awareness is the capacity of a human being.
So my aim is to bring human beings into the VSM. It may be futureless, but that's what I do.
It might be helpful to start with differentiating different types of self-awareness. If you spend developmental theory, the type of self-awareness we are talking about is a very instrumental one. It's being aware and being able to reflect upon what does not work. But you have a huge range of different types of self-awareness, and I never heard them even pointing to in this community.
So I had quite a debate with big tall guy, I can't remember his name, about Spencer Brown yesterday. And always, like all these things, when you talk to someone afterwards, you think, oh, I should have said this. Spencer Brown is like a blank canvas. Once you start identifying with things, so I'm always wary. I think it's often when people start categorizing things, levels of cognition. So I had a long chat with Maurice Yolis the other day, and he said, I've got 15 levels of self-awareness or something. And I thought, great. And Jonathan Hyatt puts moral framework in 7 categories. When people categorize things, what they are not often showing is the distinctions they're using to make that. If you use Spencer Brown, you make your own categories, you're making your own distinction.
But isn't the key question, the question, what is one able to reflect upon? And
Yes.
how does that evolve? What are the developmental dynamics that make people able to reflect and take a broader perspective?
Right, yes.
And there are patterns in that, and there are drivers, and there are processes. So let's stop categorizing, I agree there. So
And if we go back to Spencer Brown, we can say, what are the distinctions? But the thing about self-awareness, I think is really important, is there's only 7 animals on the world that
yes,
can
the
actually,
distinctions is not the issue, it are the processes around it.
but the processes come from the distinctions in Spencer Brown. So
Perhaps, but not in developmental psychology.
they haven't got Spencer Brown yet. Okay, right, I need to move on, but I think what we need to agree is this is an area, I 100% agree with you that I would like to see self-awareness. I think it's the most important thing in a business is, are we aware of what we're doing and why we're doing it and how we're doing it? And how do you create that? And I'll show you briefly.
Complexity, the question is what is self in an organizational context? What's the ontology of an organization?
Right, this is the basic system, okay, and it's written in Access. It's not very, it's not got fancy diagrams or anything. Highest level recursion, next level, lowest level, and all the tasks. Now I'm showing you, so here, and you have to put a priority on them, and you can spread out the priorities. The priority becomes important, and I'll show you that in a minute. So system 5x identity, and you write in a simple title. But if I click on that and highlight it, and then come to description, I can write a full description in for it, which comes up later in job descriptions and things like this. Okay. So if you're sitting at your desk and the telephone rings, if we're just a small organisation, there's one of us, and I've got a job to do, put it down. I've got to create a task down here. Now, I can't create a task unless I create the levels of recursion. Now, I have to create an identity, things like that. Now, so what somebody does is, just imagine you're starting off with a small business. What you do is you put something down and you write a description, but it's there for everybody to see. So somebody else can write something. No, I don't agree with that at all. So you try, and so this system is scalable because you're doing everything through this system. But it doesn't stop you from holding meetings, having this, but it can be continuous. What happens is once you've defined the levels of recursion, you put your task in, it's a little bit like project management. If you don't put a start date and an end date, it's assumed it's a recurring event every week. So routines, regular meetings, stuff like that, you don't put a date up. If you put a start date and no end date, it'll think it starts at this date and it'll try and spread the work out as far as it can. If you put an end date in but no start date, it'll try and fit it in between now and then. You define who you want to do the task and how much, and whether that task is at that time, so it's a meeting. You can't have a meeting where people come at different times, or if that work is just to be done when they're available. You write, and you don't write emails, you write notes about how that task is progressing here. If there's any files associated with it, you put a link in here. Because one of the biggest problems I found was people filed everything all over the place. Yeah. And you either had a dictator who ran the filing system, and you had to put in so many pages of metadata, you just gave up. And what people used to do is they would store all their stuff in their little cubbyhole somewhere. And then when the next person came along, you couldn't find anything, so he would store his stuff in the cubbyhole. And you never had any information knowledge being passed on to heroes. This was a whole other what the database that was provided here was a whole other program because it related to the skills that people did. So you needed an expert in there. You had to have a system that showed you. But what I found was that the process for generating that manpower, skills, and the competency was a big task in itself. Okay. You could also put in linking keywords. I'll come to that. You could also click here if you wanted things to appear on the newsletter. Okay, and then these words alongside that come. If you pressed, you pressed work button, and off it went to work. and assigned all the jobs. And you could instantly, having done nothing else, get a whole lot of stuff. So there's the work assignment, there's the workload of everybody. The darker it is, the more hard work they are. Now I've put this in for the Metaforum, I just did, so let's imagine we're running the Metaforum. So actually it's top-down design, it's not being built at the bottom because I did it. But this person's heavily loaded, so these people have only got 2 or 3 hours a week. These are volunteers and so on. So what was really good was if people didn't put their work in, I would give them work because I said we haven't got much work. So very quickly everybody stuffed their work into the system, and they were almost forced to use it and stop themselves from getting more work. But instantly you get the workload. You get a Gantt chart. You don't have to draw the information in once, used many times. You get a newsletter that you can send out, or that could directly go to the web on the items that you want to tell people about. You get a list of your objectives. You get an Eisenhower matrix. I've probably got too much bloody stuff in here anyway. Let's just see. Now the Eisenhower, has anyone worked with an Eisenhower matrix?
No.
Okay, an Eisenhower matrix was invaluable because, and again, it's not something we often talk about in the VSM with priority. We don't often talk about priorities in the system. And it goes back to the priorities are keeping the system viable. Do you agree with that?
I do.
But in practical terms, something has to be more important than other things.
But then
So-
that's how system 3 allocates resources.
Yeah, so the resource allocation thing is priorities setting as a tip. What the system does is it knows the time of events and it knows the priority that you put in. So let's explain it. If your boss gives you a job on Monday morning and he says, I need this by Friday, it's really, really important. You go back to your desk, you go to tea and the phone rings. The phone call is urgent, the job is important, but you answer the phone call because it's urgent. Come Friday morning, 10 o'clock, and you still haven't done the important job, and the phone rings, you throw the phone out the window and you carry on with your job, because your job has become important and urgent. So what this does is importance goes like this, and urgency goes like this. Okay. So this job is most important, most urgent in this grid. And what you're looking for, the colour shows if it's resourced properly. So you can see on what you get. So do you do all of this job before you start all of this job? And what I found, or do you do all of these ones, important ones, before you? And actually there's a balance. And what you tend to do is something like that. And you have this resource line. You start to see the lower colours, that they're not resourced. It's not being resourced properly. And also, you don't just put in tasks, you put in risks and you put in constraints. So this little red bit says there's a risk to this objective being achieved. Well, this project, and a line under here shows constraints. So you're getting a constant risk analysis in the system of what's not going to work. You don't have to, and you can print that out as a risk summary if you want. Okay. So if I change the priorities in the system, this will change instantly. Now, one of the things I found, look, these two are well resourced. And the first thing that hit me was that actually a lot of my staff were tasked really from outside my organisation. We were working in matrix management, and other people were coming into my organisation, and the system had no overall system of priorities. So I was finding that tasks that I didn't consider important were being tasked from outside. But that also might happen with legal things. So one of the things I found, I'll show you, for those who are interested, I'll show you, I used to run this on my ship. And the legal side, keeping the ship legal, became actually quite a low priority. But it was a critical one because suddenly you couldn't run the ship because it didn't have a certificate anymore and you couldn't take it to sea. So you would say, well, that's the most important one. But actually running a safe ship was the most important one. And actually then operating was the most important one. So you had, it forces you to actually have to do that. Okay, so that's how an Eisenhower matrix works, and it was really useful. Now, what I can do in another, I'm going to run out of time, In another screen, I can look at all the individual tasks, not just the headings for the tasks. And so I can see
Clarification question. Who is assigning the priorities and how?
the team did. Okay, so somebody would say, my job's really, really important. I want to up the priorities. And we would socialise that. So well, actually, does that go in line with what we want to achieve? And what you would find is that got to be quite a heated debate sometimes because they wanted resources. But it's the resource
Yes.
investigate, it's a resource assignment. It's exactly right.
Yeah.
And it's not done by some autocrat, it's done by socialising through the system and continuously. You're constantly fighting and not fighting. Sorry, go ahead.
Just a quick one clarification. When I use Eisenhower matrices all the time for the way we run our business, but I'm interested the importance dimension.
Yes.
It looks like you're using the VSM systems to define importance.
No, so don't take.
Understood that.
Don't take.
No.
Yes. Don't take this on.
Okay.
So one of the problems with this is System 5 identity has to appear in System Y and System Z recursions just to get a task to appear because of the way I construct our database. But System 5, who may be the CEO sitting there, has a set of tasks that relate to that. You see what I mean? And unfortunately, they certainly have to appear in there, and they appear in the matrix. But actually, you can do the matrix for an individual. So individual could call up his own matrix. It was important to me, and that's.
But are you saying that something in system 1 is by definition higher importance than system 4? No. Yeah, so that's
No, I'm not. And you can change that. You can change the way that works.
that's a really
Yeah. No, it's no. And that again is debate. And we had a lot of debates about what the priorities were and how they were spread out. So you could say these are both number one. Low is high in this system.
yeah.
So these are both number one. And that often everyone wanted it. We were all number ones. And then you go to the resource, there's no resource. So you can see it instantly as you're working.
Yeah.
Okay, not the world.
I mean, force rank on each dimension.
Yes.
Yes, called that.
So this one, sorry, I'll just move it along a bit. This does the same, but for money. Instead of where am I resourcing, this is showing where the money is going. Because each person has a cost and outlets.
Wow.
Okay, and this is saying all the money is going down here. And that's really useful because that happened to me a lot. I said, hang on a minute, why am I spending all the money on something I don't really want to be spending on? And what I did is, instead of being flooded by work, I became very proactive. I would appear in front of desks and say, why are you spending all my money? and also, I won't do the last one, but I can also produce a budget. So you used to say, what's your budget for next year? Here we go. Here it is. And imagine how much time you spend doing budgets and things. So now there's a couple of other bits in the system. The belief generator, there's this generator system, which I just want to show you quickly. If I go back up to here, why have we got? Oh, we've got to go there. There we go. Here we go. So a lot of the systems, the complex systems in the VSM, like drawing fancy diagrams, I didn't have the time to do, and we did them through debate and socialization, and that worked quite well. So this would be a summary of all our levels of recursion. Now, again, I was just playing, but I put a business unit in. Everyone will say that should be part of all the systems. But I said, no, what the Metaforum needs is a business unit as a system 1. Okay. I put it in there to be.
It's all yours, Jonathan.
Exactly. Now, there's another one that's equally the belief generator. How do I show it? I've got to go there. Not. Okay, if I come down to here, well, we should have a file. Right. That is the environment. Now, when people did work, again, I never see anyone when they're talking about the system saying, let's map our system to the environment.
Yes.
This was a constant function. Okay. So what actually would happen is people would say, well, I'm involved in something to do with science. They put a little dot, a little thing in the system with a link. Okay. And so you would start to see, so this is the area that we want the Metaforum to cover. So in this system, I said, what we want to do is have widespread use of the VSM. What does that mean? Well, we want to be in the whole of society. We want governance, we want politics, we want art, we want education, we want business, technology, and so on. So what we do, this little square So this is the variety of the environment, and this is the variety of the metaforum. So you're mapping, you're engineering the variety is a constant thing that you're doing. And that's the one where I was talking about, where suddenly, you know, something appeared down here, and I thought, hang on a minute, whoa, we've moved into another area. So you were very aware of where you were mapping to the environment. Okay, now the belief generator, I'm very interested in what people think about this. So I didn't use any VSM words because I had a day to teach everybody. So the belief system is what system 5, and I called it why. Why are we here? Okay, and I put down here practice through experience, but that we'll get better at the VSM through practice. Okay. Then I had the vision system, which was 4, which is where are we going? Okay. And to achieve universal application of the VSM. From that belief system, you derive ideals. Okay, so an ideal is a goal that can never be achieved, or you're aiming to achieve or something. So to demonstrate the effectiveness of the VSM to gain credibility, to make VSM simple to understand, of widespread in acceptance, to integrate VSM into all areas of society, to establish system thinking ideas in education. Those are my random ideals. And this is quite hard, but it makes people think, what are our ideals in this organisation? You also have to think through what are our values. So you think through, well, we want to be friendly, receptive, and open-minded to all who are interested. We want to be valued for our contribution, and we want high standards of integrity and scholarship. That's just my values. So you can shake your head, no, we're going to lie to the bastards. So you can put in anything you want. One of the games I played with my team was to run a category, pampered pussycats and cheapo cats. And it's interesting that these ideals were very different, but the purposes were very similar. So the purposes are not your system 1s, they're the purposefulnesses that you find in your systems 3. Come on, really. So ensure understanding of concepts, to practice with a wide range of circumstances, to be aware of failures, to agree to publish standards, to conduct training. This is what I'm doing. This is where I'm going. Strategy, operations. Now what I do is create the dot product of those, or cross-multiply them. I say, how can I ensure understanding of concepts to demonstrate the effectiveness of the VMs of gain credibility? And we all go, oh, shit, I don't know. But it teases out the bits of this that relate to the bits of this. And you can generate as many sentences as you want. But once you've done that, and I should have copyrighted this before I put it up on the board. So the idea is establish the core implementation methodology. How do we apply the VSM? Well, everyone's got different ideas. So what's the core methodology for applying it? Okay, and we need to agree that. But we need to do that. There's 3 more tasks, because we need to do that for a friendly, receptive, open-minded manner. We need to do that so we're valued for our contribution, and we need to do that with standards. So you've generated 3 tasks just from one observation at the moment, and you feed those into your system. Yes.
How does that compare to the Metaforum organisation itself?
It's pretty close.
Actually, okay,
we have done exercises like this, and I mean, I've only just seen this today, but it's very close to the stuff that we did. When we put the cooperative together, we had to put a lot of values and visions and objectives in, and
so you understand the purpose of the Metaforum to society in terms of its fit.
Yeah.
So the summary of these should be our mission statement.
Yeah.
The summary of these should be our vision statement. Okay? Instead of what I found in the military, every time they came out of be looking in the darkened room, they'd come out with lots of yellow stickies, and I say, our mission is to be a world-class. Oh Christ, give it a break. And I've never seen a vision statement that doesn't start with world-class or Now that was a very useful way of enhancing brainstorming, and you've got it for all of them, all of the different things.
Jonathan, sorry to interrupt.
Yeah, go ahead.
Elena's got 7 minutes. She's starting a integration thing.
Okay, right. So
we're going to run out of coffee time.
Yeah.
Right. So there's only one thing to add then, and that's scalar analysis. One of the things you need to do in the system is to make sure that every level of recursion the purpose is written in a very particular way. That the top level is written as a purpose to direct the operating line to achieve something. The next level down is to manage. The next level down is to supervise. The next level down is to undertake. Now, it doesn't mean that the director might have tasks that he has to undertake and he can't delegate. But the way the purposes are written in the system automatically generate job descriptions with the right level of authority in it. So you're saying, no, you're directing, you're only managing this, that you're not directing it. So accountability chain again, when the system allows you to chase up through the system, the accountability chain. Who is accountable for what? Who have you agreed is accountable for what? Because, and that was incredibly useful when arguments happened.
Are you familiar with Walker, Christakis and Osberg's introductory structural modeling? So what that takes you through would be, I think it's called WYSIWYG algorithm.
Sorry, hang on. Yeah, go ahead.
Stop.
So it takes you through this sorting algorithm, this WYSIWYG algorithm, and it's a collaborative process. And it allows you to list structural dependencies in your items. So this would be.
No, yes, I know that, yes.
And this process of.
And it's similar to this.
Significantly influences this, or this depends on this. So it's a kind of collective
Right.
ordering, structural ordering, and that's how you do priorities.
Right.
With
Yeah,
the structural influence.
Yes, no, I've seen that, yes. And there's another thing that's really useful is you can, because it's got priorities in it, you can use APH or ANH.
But can you, same thing to priorities.
Yes. Yeah. No,
We are the gaps.
yeah. So, but also, anyone used APH? And the hierarchy process? So it's a voting system. That
Yeah.
then all the
Club as well.
It's a very good way of making.
There's actually quite a lot of Gary's books.
Like going on.